My next guest is a former Secretary of the United States Air Force, a Rhodes Scholar, and the first female military veteran elected to a full term in Congress. Dr. Heather Wilson is now the president of the University of Texas, El Paso. Well, Heather, it's great to see you. You know, when you were in Congress, I was working for Jeff Bingaman. I love New Mexico when we were both there, the labs, all of that. And I know what a big believer in science you are. And I guess want to stand at the conference. We covered, finance and farm workers and just every dimension. Now you're helping to run a university, and I'd love to kind of get your sense of if you were having the state of women in America, state of women in universities and science, is it where it should be?
It's not where it should be yet. And, I was listening to Cherise, and it was almost embarrassing. She talked about when her mom joined the military in 1979, which was a year after I joined the Air Force. So it makes me start to feel old. But we still have a ways to go. When I graduated from high school, which was 1978, only 10% of medical doctors in America were women. And now it's over 50%, but there are some fields where women are still underrepresented. Engineering is one of them. The sciences, it varies a lot. Biology, women are fairly strongly represented, but some of the other sciences, they're not. In engineering at our university, University of Texas at El Paso, we're about 22% women in undergraduates. And it's not just a challenge with women, it's with minorities and first-generation college students as well. So we've got a ways to go.
So what do you do with that? I mean, and let me just give you a little bit of a preamble. Recently, we did a forum with the Hill on science. And we had many of the people Franz Cordova, who used to head the National Science Foundation, Ellen Stofan, who's now running the Air and Space Museum, used to be the chief scientist of NASA, Susan Hockfield, the former president of MIT, Eddie Bernice Johnson, who's from the Science Committee in the House, your former colleague. So we had lots of outstanding, outrageously awesome women, on various contours of science, but they, like you, all said it's not where it should be. So I guess my blunt question is, how do we fix that? What is the fix that draws, that brings in that talent onto those tracks?
There's a couple of things. One of the things, I used to be the president of another university that was all engineers and scientists, and we did some really digging into this. And when you talk to boys, so teenage boys, are quite happy and satisfied to know they'll get to work with cool stuff and solve a problem. And there's all overlap in the middle, but a disproportionate number of boys are satisfied by that and interested in that. A disproportionate number of girls want to know why the problem matters. So if I say, come be a civil engineer, you get to build water systems and make things all work, or build bridges and skyscrapers, that I'm appealing to the boys in the audience. If I say, do you want to if you want to bring clean water to communities that need it, help fight disease in children because they have clean water to drink, then be a civil engineer. It's the so what that matters to more teenage girls. And when we talk about science and engineering, too often universities, including my own, don't start with the so what. And we miss a lot of teenage girls because of it.
When you were a member of Congress, I don't know whether I never presume people's politics, but you were a Republican member of Congress. I don't know if you've maintained your Republican status, but I sort of find this tension over science and over knowledge and over empiricism an interesting one. And I sort of feel like America and the world are simultaneously on the edge of so many major technological revolutions ahead that will transform our lives, while at the same time, if Galileo were resurrected, he would be found guilty today. So, I'm sort of, I just sort of feel like, whether it's over climate or others, I'm just sort of, I saw your frown there. I mean, Susan Hockfield agreed with me, but I guess
I'm quizzical. Found guilty of what, Steve?
Of saying that the Earth does not, that the sun does not rotate around the Earth. That you would still find, a kind of rejection of science or rejectionism, and there are so many leading women out there who are on the front field of science, and as I see it. And I'm interested in whether you think this tension between anti-science and science is something that can be reconciled. or one?
I don't accept your premise, I guess.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that the advances in science are coming so quickly that our world is being revolutionized every day. And you think about it, I'm the third generation aviator. So my grandfather started flying in the First World War, shortly after the Wright brothers. He lived to see a man walk on the moon. The advances that we're seeing in medicine today, even in this current pandemic, the idea when they were trying to find a polio vaccine that you could develop a vaccine and test it in less than a year was just anathema to our parents in the 1950s. You carry more computing power in your pocket than all of NASA had to take a man to the moon. This is an exciting time to be in science, and it is changing a lot of things. But I do think that the real risk is that we're going to leave some people behind, and the need to up our game when it comes to mathematics and science. If you go to a dinner party, Steve, and you say, well, I can't read, everyone is shocked that you're, oh my gosh, it's a shame. But if you say, oh, I was never very good at math, that's like socially acceptable. It shouldn't be if it wasn't socially acceptable in our culture to be innumerate, you would find fewer people that were willing to say that or tolerate that, or there would be an effort to improve mathematics and scientific literacy. So I think there is a cultural issue there, but it has nothing to do with ideology.
It's a really fascinating insight, and I totally agree with you. Let me ask you about another thing. We're sitting at a point of great drama and trauma in America, right? Over race, over income inequality, educational differences, et cetera, and COVID on top of that. And I often wonder if these times of crisis are good opportunities to sort of rewire how we do things. And as we think about education, and as you talk about what you just shared with us, I don't see how America thrives in that world unless we figure out a way to get continuous education, where people can be refreshed, where we have new credentialing. And I'm just wondering to what degree the field that you're in now needs some healthy disruption so that we figure out how to get people swimming in and out of educational channels.
And I think I think you're absolutely right. But I think let me put a caveat on it. Higher education, and it's frustrating sometimes to me, but higher education traditionally has not changed quickly. It's one of the stabilizing forces in American society, and almost like the church in some ways. It doesn't move fast until 6 months ago. And when we didn't have a choice, people realized that they could be agile. That in some ways is probably one of the most important lessons for higher education in the last 6 months is if you have no choice, you can make a move. And it's liberating in some ways to look at, all right, now what have we learned from this that takes us back to make us even better? And some of it won't. There are all these people saying, all education is going to go online now, we have learned some new technologies, including this one, but we've also learned how deeply social people we are. So how do we blend these things in a way that makes us better than we were? And you're right that higher education has to be part of the engine of economic recovery, because there are jobs that went away that aren't going to come back. And people are going to need to figure out how to create new jobs and how to qualify for those jobs. And higher education has to be there for people. It's always been a beacon of hope, and it has to be there.
Heather, just last question I want to squeeze in here. I mean, it's just you're on the National Science Fund board. I believe you're major educator. UT El Paso's so well known for this. This has been a very America-centric conversation today. We've not talked about the rest of the world. How worried are you that we're sitting and self-satisfied with what we've done, but in a lot of areas, the United States is less and less competitive with other parts of the world, particularly in investment in education, investment in R&D?
We invest a lot in education, we continue to invest a lot in R&D, both federal government and more. There's more private sector R&D that the government funds these days, but the timelines are different. I think the real risk is over the long term is the growing Chinese economy, and I say risk because whether China is able to transform from a controlled politically society and a somewhat free enterprise system to one that embraces more of the ideals that are shared in the West, I think is one of the big questions for the next 10 to 20 years. Can you be oppressive politically and free economically? And I think that's the real challenge for us and for the Indo-Pacific.
Well, Dr. Heather Wilson, president of the University of Texas, El Paso, I've really enjoyed this. I know you were a former Secretary of the Air Force. I was an Air Force brat. I grew up with DoD schools. So thank you so much for your leadership, your time, and thoughts today.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Have a great day.